Rebirth. Change the routine to soak the princess. Introduction. Through a lifetime of travel, Zhou Yan, with the wisdom and knowledge of modern people, successfully became the only close guard of the long princess. And win the princess's heart. However, there are too many bad people in this world. In just a few days, Zhou Yan was forced to cross again. No, it was a rebirth. Reborn, Zhou Yan looked around at the familiar scene and wept with joy. Chapter 1. Taking a different path. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Kyoto, Princess Chang Mansion. Zhou Yan stood in front of the mansion with his hands leaning on knives, looking up towards the sky. In the darkness, a dense rain of arrows shot in with a terrifying howl of wind. You should have gone far, right? Gently exhaling, Zhou Yan looked at the increasingly cold light, with no trace of fear on his blood-stained cheeks. The next second the sound of breaking through the air came, and he wanted to wield his sword, but after half an hour of fierce fighting, he was already exhausted and could only let sharp arrows pierce through his body. However, even though 10,000 arrows pierced through his heart, he wore a smile on his face. For half an hour, it was enough for that beautiful figure to escape from this land of trouble. I am incompetent and cannot protect the princess for the rest of my life. If there is an afterlife, I will not let thieves approach the princess at all. Changyu. Take care. Falling to the ground with his back up, Zhou Yan watched as black shadows screamed from beside him, crossing his head. Struggling to curl up her body, she struggled to take out a small jade plaque from her arms. With a light swipe of her fingers, a flash of spiritual light flashed through, and she disappeared into the darkness with her already written words. In an instant, the line of sight gradually became blurred. He just held the jade plaque and stared blankly, his hazy eyes mixed with nostalgia and unwillingness. He knew he couldn't wait for the princess's reply. At this moment, the elusive time seemed to suddenly take shape and form. Transformed into heavy water droplets, they fell to the heart with a ticking sound. Wave ripples in circles. Slowly, the piercing cries of killing around grew farther and farther away, until they disappeared. But the ethereal ticking sound became increasingly clear, so clear that people could clearly feel the passage of time and life. Changyu, in the next life, I will marry you. A beautiful shadow reflects in the heart, accompanied by the ripples of joy or anger. But at this moment, a foot that fell beside his ear tore open this void dream, and the sand and soil carried by the foot penetrated into his eyes, instantly dragging Zhou Yan back to reality. Then he was shocked to see that the dark shadows that had jumped over him had all retreated together at some point. Then, a beautiful figure that he most wanted to see at this moment, but also least wanted to see, appeared in his vision. The person is wearing a plain dress and mopping the floor, with a light color and makeup. The dark clouds are cleverly arranged with a coiled dragon hairpin. Eyes are like the moon, eyes are like stars, and red lips are stained with blood. Zhou Yan's already dilated pupils suddenly tightened as he looked at the figure that should have appeared dozens of miles away. He wanted to say something, but the blood pouring into his throat made him unable to say a word, and he could only let out a rapid and hoarse sob. At this moment, with a gold dot-plated dagger pressing against the long princess's chest, Lian Bu lightly moved and arrived at his side. Slowly bowing down, he placed a small jade card in his hand, just like a standard one. With watery eyes, he gave him a deep glance and stood up straight. The night wind swept by, lifting a corner of the goose-yellow plain skirt and blowing open the strands of green silk that slightly covered the phoenix's eyes. I don't know if it's because the blood in the wind is too strong, and the soft color in the beautiful and narrow eyes quickly fades away, replaced by a terrifying blood red. The black-clothed people who surrounded them were so frightened that they dared not commit any illegal acts. Yang Road cannot hold your hand, but Yin Si can hold you back. Little carpenter, I am waiting for you on the Huangquan Road. The appearance of Princess Chang already caused a short circuit in Zhou Yan's brain. The text on Zhao Yupai, which had already been written but not sent, made him temporarily lose his ability to think. In a moment, when Zhou Yan suddenly realized something, he looked up desperately and saw only the crimson splashing when the gilded dagger was stabbed. Changyu. With a cry of surprise, Zhou Yan flipped up from the ground. Looking down at the body, looking up around, the brain froze for the third time. The surroundings are still pitch black, but there are no broken limbs on the ground. Not to mention the heartbreak of those who perished. Here is. Feeling his intact body, Zhou Yan looked around, feeling as if he had been here before. Just as I was thinking about it, a voice suddenly came from the side. Eat it. Eat it well and get on the road. Turning his head, a man dressed as a prison guard stood on the other side of an iron fence, talking and throwing a food plate over. Looking at the sticky dishes on the plate, which were like pig food, a dusty memory flashed through Zhou Yan's mind, causing him to be stunned. He immediately rushed to the fence and pounded the rusty iron cage in front of him, making a dull, clang-clang sound. The court has regulations. 3 dishes of decapitated rice and 1 pot of wine. Where's the wine? Where's my wine? Wine. Turning back, the jailer waved his fire stick and slapped Zhou Yan on his finger bone. It's good not to let you be a starving ghost. Do you want wine? Don't let his mother talk here. If you make any noise, I will send you on the road now. After speaking, the prison guard raised the fire stick in his hand again, glared fiercely, and turned around to leave. I am reborn. Rubbing the swollen phalanx under a stick, Zhou Yan looked at the prison guard's receding figure, but his eyes were filled with ecstasy. No wonder there is a feeling of familiarity. It turns out that God has given me a chance to start over again. Even the dialogue is the same as when the beginning. Excitedly wandering around the cell, Zhou Yan pinched his arm again and again, making sure he wasn't really dreaming. He sat down on the ground and burst into laughter. With a smile, tears suddenly flowed out. Changyu, I will definitely protect you this time previous life. No, in the past life. He came to this world inexplicably due to an accident. Although it was difficult for him to adapt from a technologically advanced modern society to a feudal dynasty with scarce resources. But he gained his family. This made Zhou Yan, who had been an orphan since childhood, quickly fall in love with this place. However, just as he was leisurely serving as his main soldier, preparing to live his life so calmly but happily, he was caught up in a strange case. All those involved in the case will be interrogated and beheaded, and their relatives will be punished. Fortunately, the knowledge he carries in his mind far exceeds that of this world. With the wisdom of modern people, he ultimately solved this strange case and was appreciated by the princess. Then, with extraordinary insights and various novel ideas, he rose all the way. In addition, his mastery of the medical knowledge of Great China, although simple, still made him the most promising martial arts genius in the world. In just 2 years, she became the only personal guard around the Princess Chang. But unexpected events often catch people off guard. A group of fierce soldiers emerged from nowhere and attacked Princess Chang's mansion at night. In just a few sticks of incense, they defeated the mansion soldiers to the point of collapse. Even with him, the first martial arts genius of Dayu, who strictly guards, it is only possible to delay the princess's escape for a while. In the end, both of them died, and even in the end, he didn't understand who it was and why he had to take action against the princess. And how did that group of extremely fierce armored soldiers openly invade the imperial capital of the Dayu dynasty? I have been staying by Changyu's side for the past few years, and although I know some things about the court, I don't know much about it. I really can't figure out who is going to deal with Changyu. With his eyes slightly narrowed, Zhou Yan quickly sorted through everything that had happened in the past few years in his mind and did not find any suspicious individuals. However, he can be certain that this person must be in court and hold a high position. Otherwise, there would be no strength or courage to attack Princess Chang's mansion. Moreover, a group of fierce soldiers attacked Princess Chang's mansion at night, but there was no rescue coming despite such a big commotion, which is enough to illustrate many problems. Standing up, Yu reading www.yuukangshu.net glanced through the palm-sized window at the glowing sky, and Zhou Yan slowly moved his steps on the ground covered in hay. Reborn. This is an opportunity and a challenge given to me by heaven. Although the script in my mind can help me avoid many troubles. Should I still follow the old path? After all, even though I could smoothly return to Changyu's side according to my past life, in the end, I was still just a guard and could not come into contact with some secrets. Unless I can stand on the court. Chao Tang. But how do I get into the Chao Tang? Is it difficult or do I have to get an official title? Even if I have the heart, my brain. I don't have enough time. With some distress, Zhou Yan pulled his hair and stood still, staring at the deep corridor outside the iron cage, feeling somewhat bewildered. At this moment, there was a faint crash sound coming from the end of the corridor. In no time, 2 prison guards holding shackles appeared in sight. As Zhou Yan looked at the prominent character, Zhu, on their chests, his slightly hazy eyes instantly became clear. Zhu soldiers, soldiers, soldiers. Yeah. My current identity is still a big soldier. And isn't the military headquarters the best choice for me to step into court? With my talent for martial arts and my knowledge reserves far beyond this era, it is not impossible to be crowned as a king or general. Of course, the prerequisite is to live smoothly today. But this is not a matter. Remembering the scenes of how he turned danger into safety and how he was appreciated by the princess, Zhou Yanhui's face lit up with a smile. This made the 2 prison guards who handcuffed their padlocks twitch their lips and glance at each other, understanding each other's thoughts tacitly. This person has a brain bubble. Chapter 2. Wang Defa. You are listening at novelfull.audio. In the 27th year of Changwu, on the 5th day of the 7th month, at noon, November 45, noon. After going through the 2 processes of sentencing and passing through the hall, Zhou Yan and a group of death row inmates were taken out of the gate of the Tingwei office. After the street parade, it officially entered the questioning and execution stage. These soldiers are really unlucky. If you lose something, you'll lose your head. You're right. But I wonder why the court doesn't send heavy troops to guard something important. Because the court is foolish. 13. Listening to the voices of the people surrounding the street, Zhou Yan couldn't help but roll his eyes like he did in his previous life. Some memories buried deep in the brain are also emerging at this moment. On that day, the wind was not urgent and the sun was not strong. It's just an ordinary day. At night, as he had just finished his night patrol, he suddenly received an order to send them to guard an item sent from the Buddhist kingdom in the western regions. Upon hearing this, Zhou Yan secretly rejoiced for a while, finally not having to wander around the street in boredom. In addition, the things were placed in the north campus adjacent to the inner city wall. No matter how you think about it, this task is much easier than patrolling the city. Maybe while on duty, you can still sneak a peek for a while. However, it was such a simple task that a shocking incident occurred. Until midnight. As a flash of lightning suddenly pierced through the night sky, a huge demon phantom towering over 10 feet suddenly appeared in the pouring rain. The demon stood in the middle of the schoolyard, bent over and grabbed the sandalwood box that they were ordered to guard. Then, without waiting for everyone to react, a silver dragon that once again illuminated the night sky flashed away, and the huge phantom and sandalwood box disappeared simultaneously. The item responsible for guarding has been lost. It was extremely bizarre and eerie. Afterwards, a total of 13 people in his small flag were thrown into prison. And after the sudden review of relevant personnel failed, the enraged emperor immediately issued an order, and all personnel involved in the case will be interrogated and beheaded, and their relatives will be punished at first. In order to survive, I only focused on the case itself and ignored many other things. Now, when I think about it, there are really many strange things about this case. The voices of the onlookers around him allowed Zhou Yan to vividly recreate the old case in his mind. Indeed, based solely on the degree of the wrath of the Holy One, individuals can understand that lost Buddhist objects must be extremely important. So, is the purpose of the court sending us small city guards to guard just to cover up? Or is this intentional? Hiss. Are we just being pulled out to take the blame? I don't want it yet, but upon closer reflection, Zhou Yan suddenly felt a tingling sensation on his scalp. From this moment on, he had already been sucked into a murky deep pool. And just as he was brainstorming wildly, they were all death row inmates escorted by yamen guards and had already left the west gate along the main street. In the west, the white tiger dominates and suppresses evil spirits. The court set up the execution ground here to take advantage of the terrain and minimize the breeding of evil spirits and spirits. Furthermore, the entire Kyoto city has a standard zigzag layout. The imperial city is located in the northern area of the inner city, which frees up space and allows a main street to run from east to west. Therefore, with convenient transportation, the east and west city gates naturally become the most densely populated areas. So besides suppressing evil spirits, setting the execution ground at the west gate naturally has the intention of warning the people. Don't commit adultery, otherwise your head will fall. The identity has been verified. Prisoners Sun Deqing, Zhou Yan, Li Qing. At 12:15 December 30th, noon, the final procedure before execution was completed. After the official in charge of the physical examination finished singing and reading the final report, he retreated back to the side of the supervising officer and waited for 3:15 noon to open the sword and ask for execution. At this moment, accompanied by the excruciating sound of the executioner sharpening his knife, the scene was suddenly filled with cries and grievances. The vast majority of prisoners have collapsed to the ground, and some have completely lost their ability to manage the water. The yellow-brown liquid flowed out of his pants, causing the people around him to block their mouths and noses. Zhejiang, don't be afraid, it's just a matter of one knife. 18 years later, we'll still sit and drink together. It's just that in the next life, we shouldn't be this unlucky soldier anymore. A young man named Sun Deqing beside Zhou Yan turned his head and squeezed out an ugly smile. As both officers, they usually walk the closest on weekdays. In addition to being a few years older, Sun Deqing has always regarded Zhou Yan as his younger brother. Now seeing him so nervous that he couldn't even speak, Sun Deqing comforted him and spoke out. Lao Sun, I'm fine. Turning his head to look at the man beside him, he saw that although he was not as miserable as others, his body was also constantly trembling. Zhou Yan smiled slightly and said, maybe we can't die. How could it be? Sun Deqing just smiled bitterly and shook his head to comfort Zhou Yan in the opposite direction. Before Quan Dang died, he heard a cold joke. Seeing this, Zhou Yan didn't say much, his gaze crossed the crowd and turned towards the direction of the city gate. In his previous life, after saying these words to Sun Deqing, he started shouting loudly, claiming that he knew the whereabouts of the lost item. Of course, being able to say this is not aimless. After being imprisoned for 3 days and losing countless brain cells in battle, Yu finally sorted out this strange case. But the eunuch did not believe his words. Not only did he have someone slap his mouth, but he also had someone strangle his tongue. Fortunately, at this moment, the long princess disguised as a man happened to pass by the execution ground, leaving him in a desperate situation. Chanyu should have come over at this moment. Counting the time in my heart, I estimated that I should have been slapped over by now. Zhou Yan straightened his neck and his body trembled slightly. It's not that I'm afraid the script might be wrong, but because I'm about to see that beautiful figure, I can't help but feel excited. Sure enough, in no time, the Grand Prince surrounded by 4 sword-wielding attendants appeared in sight. Ha! Zhou Yan breathed out a soft breath as he looked at the Grand Prince, emitting a surge of vitality all over his body. Since my wife has arrived, let's start performing. So, after stabilizing his mind, Zhou Yan turned his head to look at the supervisor, his eyes full of confidence. However, just as he was about to shout out the shocking words that shocked the whole audience, a person kneeling not far away started shouting at his throat first. "Sir! I know where the lost thing is." A loud shout was like a thunderous moment of silence in the entire venue. Zhou Yan also felt dizzy from the explosion. Turning his neck stiffly and looking to the side, the corners of his mouth and eyes twitched uncontrollably. The young man who was shouting with his head pounding was a member of Sun Diqing's team. He was not very familiar with him, but only knew that his name was Wang Defa. And just like this person's name, Zhou Yan looked at him, squeezed his eyes, and then squeezed them hard, with a question mark and an exclamation mark on his forehead. "Wang, Defa. Not buddy, do you also have a script?" Chapter 3. Still needs to be me. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Is it because I delayed for a few minutes to avoid clapping, causing a change? Or is the plot already like this? Wang Defa's sudden statement directly left Zhou Yan in place, but it did not affect the development of the event. As Wang Defa's cries spread, everything around him fell silent for a moment, and then there was an uproar. The eunuch, dressed in a crimson official robe and with a silver fish bag on his waist, was also stunned when he heard Wang Defa's shout. He immediately sneered and said, "You're really on the brink of death, you're talking nonsense. Go, don't you shut your mouth yet." With an extremely impatient wave of his hand, as the soldiers next to him approached, the beheading officer glanced at the miniature corona lying on the table in front of him. His palm, holding the beheading order, tightened as if he was a bit impatient. Don't shut his mouth. At this moment, the Grand Prince, dressed in a luxurious robe and dressed as a man, had already walked to the execution ground. "Jian, your highness." Upon seeing the person coming, the eunuch jumped up from his seat and quickly walked around the table to the prince, with a sneer on his face. "Why did your highness come?" "Passing by." He casually uttered 2 words, and the Grand Prince pointed to Wang Defa with a sharp gaze. Why didn't Lord Gao listen to what he was going to say? "Your highness, as for the dead prisoners, there will always be some crazy words before their death, there's nothing pleasant to hear." Bowing down, the officer in charge of beheading had a very respectful and humble attitude, but there was no hint of giving way to the Crown Prince inside or outside the words. "Your highness, it is time now. If you do not execute, it will be a dereliction of duty on your part, so. Since it's about lost items, we can't help but deal with them carefully." Unable to get used to the official in the fey robe in front of him, the Grand Prince waved his hand to signal his attendants to bring Wang Defa closer, but at the same time, a sentence completely blocked his mouth. "If Father Emperor blames me, I will bear the responsibility." "Well. Okay." Seeing that the situation had become a foregone conclusion, the supervisor showed the qualities that a 4th-rank officer should possess. Respectfully elevated the Grand Prince to the throne and immediately ordered people to disperse the surrounding onlookers. "If your highness asks you anything, just answer it. Don't talk nonsense." Everything was arranged properly, and the eunuch stood next to the Grand Prince, looking at Wang Defa who was being brought closer and shouting in a low voice. Upon hearing this, the Grand Prince cast a faint glance at the fey-robed officer beside him, and then turned his gaze to the trembling person in front of him. "Don't be nervous, just answer whatever you ask." "Yes." In a low voice, the calm voice of the Grand Prince made Wang Defa's body shake less violently, but he never dared to look up at the person in front of him from beginning to end. "Do you say you know the whereabouts of the lost items on the campus?" "Yes." "Where is the thing?" "Well." Wang Defa's previously relaxed body tightened again, burying his head a little under his chest. "Your Highness is probably going to ask the people of Air Qi." "What do you mean?" Upon hearing Wang Defa's answer, the Grand Prince furrowed his eyebrows and a hint of disappointment appeared. "Your Highness, this is it. Feeling the dissatisfaction in the words of the person in front of him, Wang Defa slammed his head to the ground and spoke urgently, "Your Highness, you know. During non-war times, whether it's patrols or duty, daily tasks are basically assigned in order according to the organization. But on that night's rotation, the second flag was ranked before our little flag, so I believe there must be a problem here. Otherwise, the ones who lost their treasures and were beheaded would be their second flag, not our first flag." Wang Defa's voice fell, and the entire execution ground immediately fell into a dead silence. A group of death row inmates looked at each other, first showing doubts, and then surprises emerged. The prisoners who suddenly understood something seemed to see a glimmer of hope for life, and when they looked at Wang Defa again, their eyes became eager. Except for one person. At this moment, Zhou Yan stared at Wang Defa's back, his eyes flickering with a faint light. After the initial confusion, he quickly calmed down and silently followed the development of the situation. Wang Defa's words now also reminded him of some details from that night. At the beginning of the hour, 11 p.m. "Zhejiang, it's too easy for you to talk too much. We are one flag, why is it that his two flags are worth the second and fourth shifts, while we have to guard the third and fifth shifts? Isn't it all night duty? What's the difference?" "There's a big difference. As soon as the two flags of Ren Air Chi Cho Shi, 1.3 o'clock, pass, we can rest. We still have to endure for an hour." "Alright, you didn't say anything, so stop nagging and be careful not to get hit." "Ah. Fortunately, it's cool today, otherwise it would be unbearable." Listening to Sun Deqing's complaints, Zhou Yan looked up at the sky. The moon is bright and the stars are sparse. At the first moment of Zichu, 11:15 p.m. "Hey. How can we say, change on this day? Yeah, there's no sign of rain at all." Zhou Yan looked up again. Dark clouds cover the top, and the stars and moon are nowhere to be seen. Afterwards, the silver dragon broke through the sky, and a magical shadow suddenly appeared indeed. I was also very strange at the time why Erky insisted on changing positions with us just this night. But at that time, my attention was all focused on retrieving the lost item and I didn't delve into it. Afterwards, Xiaoming de Bao even forgot about this matter. Thinking about it now, it really seems strange. Is there really someone involved in this case among the second banner? No, a small flag, plus a small flag leader, is only 13 people. It is impossible for such a small establishment to have such great energy to be related to this case. So, it can only be said that the nephew of a certain nobleman happened to be training in the second banner, and he happened to know some insider information, so much so that night, the second banner commander said he wanted to exchange shifts with the leader. But even so, based solely on this speculation, it may be difficult to reverse the current situation. Even if we can delay for a few days, we will still end up dead. After all, Erky was able to change shifts unpredictably, and now there must be a way to stay out of it. To escape the fate of being beheaded, I have to rely on myself. Many thoughts flashed through his mind like sparks of lightning, and while Zhou Yan withdrew his gaze from Wang Defa, he also restrained his divergent thoughts. It has to be said that Wang Defa's sudden statement before was really a shock to him, but now it seems that this is just a normal person's survival instinct. As expected by Zhou Yan, Wang Defa's words were only exchanged for the furrowed and tighter eyebrows of the Grand Prince. "It's a bit illogical that you were supposed to be worth it, but you were replaced by the second flag, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything. Besides, as you said, basic tasks are assigned in order according to organizational structure. As the Prince, intelligence is naturally online. So there is no need for Wang Defa to explain in detail, and the Grand Prince fully understands what he wants to express." A sentence instantly turned the faces of the death row inmates pale again. Fortunately, the Grand Prince did not directly reject this matter. After a moment of contemplation, he spoke up, but it's about the lost item, it's still safe to investigate. Let's put it in prison first, right?" When he said these words, the eldest prince turned his head to look at the beheading officer beside him. He saw that he had lowered his head without any intention of speaking, and a faint curve curved his lips. "Father, I will go back." The lower official takes orders. The Grand Prince immediately bowed to the ground as the supervisor beheaded him. The extremely respectful appearance made the prince snort lightly, turn around, and leave, without any intention of lingering any longer. But just then, an untimely voice drifted over. "Your Highness, I really know where the lost thing is. If you leave Chapter 4, your man will be gone." You are listening at novelfull.audio. A troublemaker is a troublemaker. Before Zhou Yan's voice could fully fall, the angry reprimand of the beheading officer had already spread throughout the room. "What are you doing one by one? Take these troublemakers back to prison." "Yes. Your Highness." Glancing at the group of soldiers approaching towards this side, Zhou Yan looked at the Grand Prince, who had only paused before continuing forward, feeling a bit anxious. "Changyu. If you leave now, your husband will be gone." Zhou Yenyang cursed his disobedient wife in his heart, raising his neck and raising his voice a bit. "Your Highness. I can take you back to find your lost property now. If I can't find it, your Highness can behead me." The sound fell, and the Grand Prince, who had already reached the outskirts of the execution ground, finally stood still. However, the prisoners in the field were instantly overwhelmed by Zhou Yan's words, and they no longer cared about their identity and occasion, cursing and shouting loudly. "Zhou Yan! Are you crazy? Your Highness has already promised to investigate this case again. Do you want to stay away from everyone?" "Yeah, Captain Wu. It's better for us to patiently wait for the court to investigate the case." The emotions of the prisoners were raging, and they were on the verge of losing control. The soldiers on the field kicked and kicked repeatedly, and it took a lot of effort to calm down the group of death row inmates. However, although they no longer shouted loudly, they kept cursing softly, and everyone's gaze towards Zhou Yan carried a strong killing intent. No one believes he can retrieve the lost item. And once he is unable to find the lost Buddhist artifacts, the easily won glimmer of vitality by Wang Defa will completely turn into nothingness. How can everyone not hate this? Of course, there are exceptions, and Sun Diqing never yelled or cursed from beginning to end. Even a few times, he opened his mouth to persuade his colleagues around him, but his lips and teeth parted a few times, unable to say a word. "Your Highness, any further delay will miss your Majesty's instructions." The Grand Prince stood still as if hesitating, and a servant beside him spoke up to advise. It is obvious that, like the vast majority of people, he feels that Zhou Yan is just playing around. But listening to the sound coming from afar, Zhou Yan was really anxious. As he looked at the familiar figure behind him, a scene flashed through his mind that accompanied him. He blurted out, "Your Highness. What you get on paper is shallow, and you must take action if you know it." This is the favorite sentence that Princess Changyu would recite after reading a book. Upon hearing these words, the Grand Prince finally stopped hesitating and turned around to walk back to the execution ground. He approached Zhou Yan and looked at him with a faint smile. "It seems that you have read for a few years, but you have used this sentence in the wrong place." "Yes." Zhou Yan responded with a hint of sarcasm as he cooperated. He naturally knew that this statement was not appropriate to use here, and shouted it out just to remind his restless daughter in law to practice to gain true knowledge. "Your Highness. All right, it's already a bit late, and I don't care if there's more or less." The attendant next to him was still trying to dissuade, but before he could finish speaking, the Grand Prince, dressed as a man, had already raised his hand. Although she is a woman, Princess Changyu has a male-like determination. Since she has made a decision, she will no longer hesitate and sway left and right. "If you can't find the lost item, would you rather be beheaded immediately?" "Yes." "Okay." The scrutinizing gaze fell on Zhou Yan, and the Grand Prince put away the faint smile on his face and said 4 words without emotion, "Where is the thing?" Facing those cold eyes, Zhou Yan's heart wavered. Just as he was about to give an answer, he suddenly remembered his current identity. In order to make the whole matter seem reasonable, he turned to ask, "Can I ask a question first?" Bold. The voice of Zhou Yan's inquiry had just spread, and a furious shout followed closely. But before the glaring servant could continue to rage, the Grand Prince raised his slender and fair palm and said, "You ask. May I ask your highness, have there been any personnel guarding the campus after the incident? Have the guards been replaced during this period?" After the incident, the campus was taken over by Ji Jinwu and the Forbidden Army, and it is still under strict surveillance without any replacement of guards. With no signs of joy or anger on his face, the Grand Prince calmly answered the question, his cold eyes fixed on Zhou Yan's eyes, waiting for his answer. "Then there's no possibility of stealing the sky or changing the sun." Zhou Yan showed a hint of joy in a timely manner and, amidst the somewhat bewildered expressions on everyone's faces, firmly said, "So, I dare to confirm that the lost thing is still in the schoolyard." How could it be? Not only was the campus thoroughly investigated, but it was also close. How could things still be there? As Zhou Yan finished speaking, before the Grand Prince could speak, the attendant following him first sneered. The faces of the group of death row inmates turned even paler, each falling limp to the ground without the strength to curse. They could only use their eyelids to cut Zhou Yan, as if saying, "Are you an idiot?" Fortunately, the Grand Prince did not show any dissatisfaction with Zhou Yan's remarks. He casually glanced at the talkative servant beside him and ordered to speak up, "Take them to the campus." 2 quarters later, the North Campus. "Where is the thing?" The Grand Prince, dressed in men's clothing, looked around the campus guarded by the soldiers and turned his head to look at Zhou Yan, who was being escorted by 2 soldiers on the side. "In." Subconsciously raising his arm, Zhou Yan wanted to point out a direction, but was unsuccessful due to the neck shackles around his neck. "Remove the torture equipment." Capturing this detail at a glance, the Grand Prince ordered someone to remove the shackles from Zhou Yan's neck. Without the constraint of the splint, Zhou Yan moved his arm and without saying a word of nonsense, he immediately pointed to the martial arts stage in the center of the school field, saying, "Your Highness, if my humble expectations are good, the lost items will be under the martial arts stage. Your Highness, please send someone to carefully search, and you should be able to find an extremely small and inconspicuous trigger mechanism." Without waiting for the Crown Prince to ask, Zhou Yan added. Upon hearing this, the Grand Prince nodded and waved his palm, saying, "You heard me, look for me. Just look along the edge." Watching the soldiers who were ordered to leave, Zhou Yan shouted in the direction of the crowd and obediently stood on one side, no longer speaking. "Listen up, everyone. Let's go beg your highness together later. It's Zhou Yan who is showing off. Why bother burying us together?" The soldiers began to search around the martial arts stage, and a group of death row inmates in the distance began to whisper and steal. "That's right. Your Highness, the Crown Prince, is still reasonable. In just one sentence, Your Highness understood the tricks involved in this case, so I believe His Highness will definitely give us a fair deal." UU reading www.uukangshu.net. Wang Defa looked up at Zhou Yan, who had the most resentment in his eyes. "That's right." Wang De finished speaking, and everyone nodded in agreement. However, some people expressed concern. But, Zhou Yan's commotion may have angered His Highness. "Didn't you hear what the guard said? Your Highness has an imperial mandate." "Yeah. Sigh. This damn guy. He's just going to die on his own, and he has to pull everyone in. Bastard. I usually think his brain is not very normal. He is indeed a lunatic." One sentence instantly ignited the anger in everyone's hearts, and the death row inmates started shouting and cursing again, one by one looking at Zhou Yan, unable to strip him alive. Why don't you think Zhejiang can really find the lost property? Sun Diqing, who had been silent for a while, finally spoke as he listened to the incessant curses around him. In fact, he doesn't have much confidence in Zhou Yan's ability to retrieve the lost property. He just knows very well that his little brother is not a troublemaker. Since Zhou Yan did so, there is a reason behind it. But his words pierced the hornet's nest, and as soon as he finished speaking, a group of death row inmates on the brink of violence immediately pointed their spears at him. However, at this moment, the taxi responsible for searching for the mechanism in the distance had a stroke, and suddenly someone exclaimed in surprise. Yes. Indeed, Your Highness. There is indeed a mechanism. At this moment, accompanied by screams of surprise, the entire campus suddenly became quiet and frightening. The Grand Prince, who had originally lowered his head slightly and didn't know what he was thinking, suddenly raised his head. The group of death row inmates who were about to vent their anger on Sun Diqing were like roosters choked on their necks. They opened their mouths one by one, but couldn't make a sound. Chapter 5. Magic sometimes can be explained by science. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. The sound of shock still surprised the prince to some extent. With a gentle nod, he walked quickly towards the martial arts stage surrounded by 4 attendants. Zhou Yan followed behind and also came to the vicinity of the martial arts performance platform. The martial arts arena, in layman's terms, is actually an arena. On weekdays, it is used for soldiers to engage in sparring and training, as well as for the training of generals. Although it won't take up too much space, in order for soldiers to have enough space to perform, the entire martial arts platform is also 5 zhang square. Of course, it is already possible to lay such a competitive area with wooden boards. This is still Kyoto. If it were a typical schoolyard in a town, at most it would be just plowing a piece of open land on sandy and gravel ground. Therefore, the entire martial arts platform will not waste too much resources to build very high, at least 1 more span high. So embedding a button that is only the size of a thumb and also made of wood on the edge of the arena can be said to be extremely concealed. After all, if it weren't for deliberate searching, who would have thought and noticed such a shocking secret hidden at their feet? I really know how to hide. Although it wasn't the first time he saw this small mechanism, Zhou Yan couldn't help but pick his eyebrows and feel emotional in his heart. The Grand Prince, who crouched sideways, looked at the mechanism button that was seamlessly integrated with the martial arts stage. He curved his willow eyebrows and raised them, reaching out his finger to poke at the small mechanism button. Ka-chi, ka-chi. With the press of the Grand Prince's finger, a faint sound of mechanical vibration immediately spread from the center of the martial arts stage, and then a 1-meter square wooden board suddenly flipped over, bringing out a hidden box underneath. Really? At this moment, Rao, with his calm demeanor as the great prince, couldn't control his emotions. He let out a low shout and quickly walked towards the sandalwood box. And when the sandalwood box was opened by the great prince, a golden light burst out of the box. It makes it difficult to look directly at. Really there. The golden light shone everywhere, causing everyone in the field to instinctively turn their heads to one side. And only after the Grand Prince scanned the contents of the eye box and closed them, did everyone look towards the direction of the martial arts stage. Looking at the young man in prison clothes. The group of death row inmates, who were originally clamoring incessantly, now all open their mouths wide and their eyes stare blankly. The people who used to curse the most were even reddened, wishing there was a crack in the ground to penetrate. Absolutely, it's simply amazing. No one can figure out how Zhou Yan inferred that the lost item was under the martial arts stage. Including the Grand Prince. I want to know how you determined that the lost item was on the campus. After inspecting the contents of the box, 2 attendants and a team of Imperial Guards were arranged to transport the box away. The Grand Prince turned around and came to Zhou Yan. At this moment, although he has regained his previous indifferent face, there is clearly a hint of appreciation in the eyes that look at Zhou Yan. The main play is here. With a chill in his heart, Zhou Yan quickly reorganized the words he had worked on in this moment and then replied with a clenched fist. Your Highness, there is often only one truth to a matter. Therefore, after carefully distinguishing all reasonable and unreasonable details, the truth of the matter can be restored. Oh. Let's talk about it. A shallow curve rose from the corner of his lips, and the Grand Prince became more and more interested. Your Highness, the biggest suspicion in this case is actually the sudden appearance of the demon. After all, this is Kyoto, and there is no demon that dares to act recklessly here. Even if there is a demon that is not afraid of guarding the palace city, if such a thing were to come, it would not be as simple as robbing something and leaving. Moreover, the Miyagi side has not made any response, so the monsters appearing on the campus can only be fake. Without any boasting or exaggerating the story, Zhou Yan calmly recounted his own inference. This made the Grand Prince nod in satisfaction, with a slightly more appreciative expression in his eyes, staring at him and waiting for further details. Since the demon is fake, taking away the box by the demon can only be a cover-up. In addition to the prosperity of martial arts, as a skilled craftsman, the Yu is also talented. Therefore, I humbly conclude that this is a theft incident involving human intervention. We are using the mentality of black under the lamp. Very good. She nodded again, and the smile on the corner of the prince's lips widened. As Zhou Yan said, the Dayu dynasty intimidated the 9 provinces with its craftsmanship and military might. Craftsmen still have to rank ahead of warriors. Therefore, within the territory of Dayu, there are countless skilled craftsmen. In this way, it is not difficult to arrange for individuals to dig a pit that can accommodate objects and attach a mechanism when building a martial arts stage. Can you determine that this is a human event based on the authenticity of the monster? Then ask me if I have changed the guards to determine if the lost item has been secretly taken away, which is great, but... After expressing his affirmation, the Grand Prince looked at Zhou Yan with a faint smile. But making such an inference based solely on these may seem a bit far-fetched, right? So I want to know, besides geography and palace guards, what other basis do you rely on to conclude that the demon is fake? My wife is indeed not someone who can easily pass it by with just 1 or 2 words. Faced with the inquiry from the Grand Prince, Zhou Yan sighed inwardly. He didn't want to elaborate on the matter of the demon's shadow in order to prevent himself from being too sharp, but at the moment, he might not be able to handle it without saying something. Your Highness, these 2 points alone cannot directly prove that the magic shadow is fake. But if these factors are added, this is a cover-up and it's a matter of 8 or 9 never leaving 10. Oh. How do you say it? He waved to a servant next to him to bring him a chair, and the Grand Prince raised his chin at Zhou Yan. Sleeping trough, so white, so tender, so silky. My wife is just beautiful. The Grand Prince's unintentional action instantly stunned Zhou Yan. The slender neck, smooth and fair skin like peeled eggs, really makes people feel a bit overwhelmed. However, in order to prevent the newly saved dog head from moving again immediately, Zhou Yan quickly shifted his gaze. Back to your Highness, the rainstorm that night was the best evidence. Keep going. Sitting on the wooden chairs brought in by the attendants, the Grand Prince leaned forward slightly, full of enthusiasm. First of all, the rain is too weird to be natural. Moreover, because of the rainstorm, the whole deception can be perfectly realized. And it also plays the most important role in the whole deception. First, it disturbs the vision. Second, it covers up the crime. Let's start with disturbing the view. May I ask your Highness, have you ever had the experience of suddenly entering a dark space from a bright environment? Of course there has been. You must know that when a person enters a dark space from a bright environment, there is a brief loss of vision. Moreover, it takes some time to adapt to the darkness. That's right. This is the key to this deception. The rainstorm like an hourglass that day almost extinguished all the fire pots in the schoolyard in a blink of an eye. Although the light of the fire pots was very limited, they suddenly fell into darkness, which would still make the soldiers on the scene lose sight for a short time. In this way, even if the appearance of the demon is just a simple outline, as long as the characteristics of the demon are outlined, people will automatically fill in the details in that situation. For example, the demon has 2 huge horns on its head. This approach directly avoids the biggest flaw in this deception, and there is no need to depict the monsters so finely that they can be believed to be true. If your Highness does not believe it, you can question the night guard separately. Your humble duty ensures that everyone sees different monsters. 2. After a pause, Zhou Yan glanced at the thoughtful Grand Prince and continued. Secondly, cover up the modus operandi. In addition to the fictional phantom, another flaw in this case is the sound produced by the mechanism when it is triggered. Your Highness has just heard that although the sound produced by the operation of the mechanism is not small, it is also not small. However, the chaotic sound of rain that night, combined with the final thunder and lightning, perfectly concealed all of this. The thunder suppressed the sound made by the mechanism, and in the end, the thick silver dragon that reflected the night sky like daylight made the soldiers who had just adapted to a hint of darkness lose their sight for a moment again. They couldn't witness the process of the box falling with the mechanism, only thinking that the thing had been snatched away by the demon. So, after thinking about these things, I concluded that this was an artificially created theft case. Because everything was too deliberate. Amazing, I didn't expect an ordinary soldier from Dayu to have such wisdom. It's truly a blessing from heaven for Dayu. As soon as Zhou Yan finished speaking, the voice of approval from the Grand Prince immediately came over. Looking at him, the appreciation in his eyes was not concealed. And besides the Grand Prince, the 2 attendants standing behind him also had a hint of admiration in their eyes at this moment. As for the group of prisoners who stretched their necks and listened attentively to the case analysis, they looked at Zhou Yan with fiery admiration in their eyes. My inner thoughts are also surprisingly consistent. Sleeping trough, is this a person? It's a person. It's even more of a dad. As you said, there is a high probability that the process of the case will be like this. After expressing his affirmation again, the prince paused and smiled lightly, but speaking of which, it seems that the only one who can manipulate the weather is the Tianji master, right? So, the mastermind behind this case is the Tianji pavilion. Fuck me. Wife, can you change your personality? Auntie, you are a princess with an invincible buff. But your husband is now a commoner. Unable to withstand a cold arrow from behind. I'm just inferring the whereabouts of the lost item based on many details. As for who was behind the scenes, and who the mechanism was, when, and how it was triggered, I really don't know. Suppressing the urge to physically beat up his wife, Zhou Yanpi replied with a smile. Finally, I added a sentence and became a chat terminator. Upon hearing this, the Grand Prince immediately raised his eyebrows and carefully scrutinized the person in front of him. The curve of his lips curled and he did not continue the topic. So, what are your thoughts on transforming a phantom into a school setting? This flashed in my mind as I was trying to recreate how the demon appeared for the Grand Prince, was noticed, and was taken under his command. Zhou Yan's face showed a hint of embarrassment and he said with some embarrassment. I haven't fully figured this out yet, but I have a rough idea. Once I figure it out and confirm, I can try to recreate it for your Highness. Oh. Do you really have any ideas? I didn't expect you to have indulged in debauchery on the craftsman's road. No, I just happened to not sleep while learning refraction and reflection. And my wife, who told you that this method came from the craftsmanship. Although it's what they did. But women can't be too smart, it will make men very tired well. It's not good for men to be too smart, as it can leave female bullies at a loss and lead to a sharp decline in their favorability. In order to avoid being too sharp and not appearing too intelligent. Zhou Yan smiled shyly and skipped all the interrogative sentence structures, following the words of the prince, saying, Your Highness, it should be normal for us in Dayu to have some knowledge of craftsmanship. That's right. With a slight nod, the Grand Prince didn't notice Zhou Yan's strange expression for a moment. He pondered for a moment and spoke faintly, "You have made contributions today. Go back and wait for the reward. As for the matter of restoring the demon shadow, I will come to you in the future." Can I go home now? Zhou Yancher was stunned and showed the expected surprise. Can. Well. After the surprise, Zhou Yan's face appeared hesitant again, and he turned his head slightly to look at a group of prisoners behind him who were eagerly looking at him. The others. Although the case is resolved, they still need to submit a letter to the Lord and have the Lord give orders. Therefore, they will have to endure a few more days of suffering. Getting up and shaking his sleeves, the slightly wrinkled clothes became straight again, and the Grand Prince held his hands behind him, his gaze calm. Upon seeing this, Zhou Yan immediately clenched his fists and said, "Thank you, Your Highness." Years of struggle have already made him familiar with everything in this world, so Zhou Yan is very clear that in this world where imperial power is supreme, life and death are only controlled by one person. The reward or punishment can only be decided by the person the final say. Being able to bluntly let him go home and promise a reward is already considered using the privilege of the Grand Prince. As for others, getting a promise is already the best outcome. And the fact is exactly so. A group of kneeling death row inmates, when Zhou Yan asked the Grand Prince for them and received the answer, had already swept away their lifeless expression. Excited and ashamed, one by one, they stared at Zhou Yan's majestic figure like a mountain. Yu reading www.yuukangshu.net was almost knocking on his father. Not to mention being locked down for a few days, even if they were locked down for another year and a half, they would not have any complaints. I resign from my humble position. The matter is over, and Zhou Yan has no reason to stay here anymore. I clenched my fists and prepared to leave. Although some people are reluctant to part with those in front of them, since they have decided to take a different path, what should be let go must be temporarily let go. Wait a minute. At this moment, the Grand Prince suddenly called out to him, reached into his arms, and pulled out a small jade plaque. This is for you. If you encounter any unresolved problems, you can ask me to help you once. It can be considered as my personal praise for solving a strange case. This. Zhou Yan was truly stunned this time as he looked at the exquisitely carved dark green token in the Grand Prince's hand. He couldn't be more familiar with this small card, and just yesterday he wrote his last thoughts and blessings on it. However, looking at Zhou Yan in a daze, the Grand Prince thought he didn't know this card and gave a faint smile. This card is made of a rare yin and yang mother stone, so it is called the mother card or yin and yang dual orders. The most magical thing about this card is that whether it is written on the yin or yang orders, even if separated by thousands of miles, the corresponding words will appear on another token. It's also very easy to use, just use a finger pen and an air machine as ink. After speaking, the prince pushed his palm forward and said, "Remember, I will only help you once. After that, I will retract this order." Yes, Zhou Yan took a soft breath and solemnly picked up the jade plaque, then clenched his fists and turned around, perfectly concealing all his emotions. "Thank you, Your Highness. My humble duty, I'm leaving." Chapter 6. Going Home. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Kyoto, Nanweiqing, Zhou family. Enough. The people of Zhejiang have all left, and you're still saying these cold words. Zhou Qinghuan swept down the only remaining tea cup on the table and glared angrily at the beautiful woman beside him. "I'm telling the truth." Li Ji shrank his neck and pouted when he saw his husband getting angry. "Is it your unlucky nephew who caused us to go to that smoky place?" "You." The outstretched finger trembled, and Zhou Qinghuan almost closed his breath. Fortunately, another beautiful woman helped him in time and said, "Master, don't worry, I will settle down with you." Every Qingming festival in the future, I will. As she spoke, tears as big as beans rolled down the woman's beautiful cheeks, and from the beginning, she began to sob and soon burst into tears. I'll leave this house to you. I've wronged you all these years. Zhou Qinghuan reached out to embrace the beautiful woman who was crying into tears, and the guilt on her face temporarily replaced sadness. At this moment, Li Ji, who had just calmed down a bit, immediately raised her eyebrows and pointed at her husband, shouting, "What's wrong with her fox spirit? It's my mother who wants to go suffer with you, okay? Mom, don't argue with Dad today. Big brother." Zhou Hao reached out and tugged at Li Ji's sleeve, pleading while turning his head to look at the second brother on the side. However, the Zhou family's Erlang seemed very unhappy because his mother was scolded as a fox spirit, and he ignored his younger sister. For a moment, the entire Zhou family fell into a state of silence. Zhou Qinghuan, Uncle Zhou Yan. He holds the position of General Flag in the Tiger Ben Guard. Originally, life was happy, but after a mission more than a decade ago, chicken flying and dog jumping became the norm in this family. Because Zhou Qinghuan brought back a woman from outside, Chu Molan. Although according to regulations, Zhou Qinghuan was unable to grant Chu Molan any status and could only be raised at home as a servant, without threatening Li Ji's status. But Li Ji simply cannot accept this matter. Even after living together for so long, I still vent my anger on Chu Molan every now and then. Dong dong dong. Suddenly, a rapid knocking on the door shattered the silence in the room. Zhou Qinghuan's eyes dimmed as he waved his hand and said, "Don't say anything, Zhejiang has returned." "Humph, it's good to be back. It's good to be back. Let this little bastard take me with you when you're back. I don't have much fun living anyway." Glancing at her husband, who was about to open the door, and then at Chu Molan, who was constantly wiping away tears, Li Ji pouted. Upon hearing this, Zhou Qinghuan stumbled under his feet, stood still, sighed, and struggled not to turn back, walking forward with heavy steps. According to court regulations, death row inmates must return their bodies to their relatives after being sentenced to capital punishment. Calculating the time, Zhou Yan's body should indeed be returned. "Second brother, I apologize for you. Zhejiang, it's because third uncle didn't take good care of you." With trembling hands, Zhou Qinghuan held on to the doorknob, but after several attempts, he couldn't pull open the small wooden door in front of him. Whispering, I unconsciously lost my eyes. It wasn't until the sound of impatiently smashing the door that I mustered up the courage to suddenly open it. Zhou Qinghuan. "Hi, third uncle, are you surprised? Are you surprised?" Zhou Qinghuan, _. Looking at the third uncle in front of him who had completely lost his facial expression management function, Zhou Yan grinned and his gums were almost exposed. "What's going on? Isn't that little bastard?" Li Ji walked a few steps to the door and looked in the direction of the courtyard door after not hearing her husband cry for a long time. "You're talking." Li Ji frowned as he saw no official delivering corpses outside. Before she could finish speaking, she saw a head poking out from her husband, who was like a stone carving. "Hi, Auntie." Li Ji. "Auntie, are you surprised? Are you surprised?" Li Ji. "The face has no blood color. Auntie. You don't know me anymore. As a martial arts practitioner, although now I have returned to the small 8th grade martial arts disciple realm. But with Zhou Yan's ear power, he could still hear the beautiful woman's previous whispers clearly through the courtyard door. So when Zhou Yan saw that his annoying aunt had also lost her facial expression management function, he opened his mouth and grinned directly into his ear. "Auntie, let's walk hand in hand. I'm here to pick you up. Zhejiang." Li Ji's pretty face suddenly turned from white to blue, and his lips trembled as he looked at the ferocious, smiling face not far away. Trembling again. With a loud voice, he fainted to death. Degree. Omicron degree, Inner City, Prince's Mansion. Go down, no need to serve. Yes, Your Highness. Respectfully, the 4 beautifully dressed maids bowed and withdrew from the main hall. Since the founding of the Grand Prince, the maids and servants in the mansion have long been accustomed to the days of eating and dying. Because they don't even need to give a bowl of tea, except for meeting this master every day. Ha! Slowly exhaled a breath, and the Grand Prince reached out and wiped his face, and the hard lines suddenly softened. Then the slender jade fingers gently pulled on the curled hair crown, and black threads poured down like a waterfall. Who? Suddenly, the Grand Prince's eyes shot fiercely, turning his head to look behind him. Your Highness, I apologize for your impoliteness. Yu reading www.uukangshu.net. Seeing the newcomer through the screen, the cold and sharp eyes of the Grand Prince dissipated. Without avoiding her feminine appearance, she walked around the screen and said calmly, "What's going on?" Your Highness, according to my subordinate's investigation, all the craftsmen who participated in the construction of the North School field exercise platform have died. Bowing and clasping his fists, the servant always maintained a posture of bowing his head, only responding and not daring to desecrate the stunning beauty in front of him. Got it. The Grand Prince didn't seem surprised by this result at all, just nodded lightly and said, "How is Zhou Yan doing?" Your Highness, this person's background is actually innocent. Both his father and mother have been reported dead, and he is currently living with his third uncle Zhou Qinghuan. This person is a general flag of the Huban Guard. There is also a younger brother in the family, Qing of the Qianyu Guard. A younger sister, with a white body. Well, please pay close attention to this Zhou Yan. He responds with any action. Remember, it's attention, not surveillance. Yes. Well, let's go. He raised his hand and gestured for his attendants to retreat. The next second, he suddenly thought of something and ordered to speak out. Tianji Pavilion continues to investigate, and I must know what role they played in the case of relics theft. Yes. The servant transformed into a phantom and disappeared, while the Grand Prince stood in the spacious and magnificent hall for a long time, sighing lightly. Turning around, feeling slightly tired, he walked towards the bookshelf and gently twisted the 3-legged golden tripod placed on it, revealing a secret passage beneath his feet. In a short moment, the secret passage slowly closed and the Grand Prince had already arrived at the magnificent mansion backed by the Crown Prince's mansion through the secret passage. Carved beams and painted rafters and pavilions in the courtyard are very beautiful. On the large golden plaque at the entrance of the mansion, there are 4 big characters engraved, Princess Chang Mansion. Chapter 7. Hi, Auntie. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Thank you to the ancestors of the Zhou family for their blessings. With a loud bang, the porcelain bowl in his hand fell heavily, and Zhou Qinghuan exhaled his turbid breath in his chest, saying, "Now it's over, everything is over." Yeah, it's all good, it's all good. Chu Molan kept caressing Zhou Yan's cheek over and over again, smiling, but her face was covered in tears. Having a home is so great. Looking at the beautiful woman crying and laughing in front of him, Zhou Yan's nose became sore. Except for the third aunt who was scared unconscious by herself, whether it was the third uncle or younger brother who secretly wiped away tears. The beautiful sister who twisted her foot due to being too excited. Everyone makes him feel warm. This is home, which he once hoped for but now truly possesses. Alright, today is a joyful day, don't even cry. Taking another gulp of turbid wine, Zhou Qinghuan wiped the corners of his eyes and laughed as he took out 3 coins of broken silver from his arms, handing it to his daughter beside him. Ziyu, go out and buy some good wine and vegetables. Okay Dad, Zhou Hao obediently responded, limping towards Zhou Yan. His bright red eyes shyly scanned his firm cheeks and whispered, "Welcome big brother home," before running out. "Slow down, don't fall again." Zhou Yan shouted, smiling as he watched his sister leave quickly. Although to some extent, he was pulled up by Chu Molan and had some hostility towards her political rival, Li Ji. But this does not hinder the relationship between their siblings. Except for two women who need to stand in line when competing, the relationship between the three siblings is still excellent on a daily basis. Hi, why did I ask Ziyu to buy groceries and drinks? Zhou Hao had just left when he suddenly thought of something. Zhou Qinghuan patted his forehead and muttered, "Zai, go see if your mother is awake." "Got it, Dad." Nodding, Zhou Xing stood up. He was born to Chu Molan, but since Chu Molan has no identity, he can only report to Li Mingming when reporting registered residence. Therefore, in name, Li Jizai is his biological mother. "I'll go see Aunt San too." A wicked smile appeared at the corner of his mouth, and Zhou Yan turned around and followed his little brother into the inner room. Seeing this, Zhou Qinghuan wanted to say something, but in the end, he just shook his head helplessly. "Mother, wake up." Inside the room, Zhou Sheng looked at the older brother who followed in strangely and came to the bedside to gently push the beautiful woman with her eyes tightly closed and her eyebrows furrowed. "Ah, Zai." Li Ji's eyelids trembled slightly as he slowly opened his eyes and looked at the handsome young man in front of him, his voice like a mosquito fly. "I think I saw your big brother just now." "Hi, Auntie." As soon as Zhou Xing finished speaking, his head popped out from behind him. Watching that a ferocious, smiling face reappear in front of him, Li Ji's face had just regained some blood color. With a swoop, he retreated again, his lips trembling lightly and said, Jiang. "Oh. Degree. Omicron degree, night. What kind of family, drinking such good wine?" Glancing at his cheap nephew in a secluded manner, Li Zister said to his husband who was enjoying his meal, "Everything that can be sold at home has been sold and managed. Although you don't have to go to that smoky place anymore, have you ever thought about how you will live in the past? Hi, as long as the person is fine. I have military pay, what are you afraid of?" Zhou Qinghuan happily took a sip of his daughter's 10-year craft wine, and casually waved his hand. The so-called exile is not actually a group of soldiers escorting a group of prisoners and traveling thousands of miles. On the contrary, exile is a fat difference that individuals compete for. The reason why it is called fat poor is because prisoners can choose their own transportation. Of course, the cost has to be borne by oneself. Those without money usually choose to buy horses, while those with money mostly buy carriages. And the food along the way was also paid out of the prisoner's own pocket. Therefore, the Yamen guards responsible for escorting along the way will not be too tired. When they arrive, the horses and vehicles purchased by the prisoners naturally belong to them. Before returning to report on work, if you sell it again, it will be a huge sum of silver. Moreover, in order to avoid getting into trouble, criminals usually stuff some silver coins into the Yamen runners first. So this trip, not only did it go for free to eat, drink, and play, but it also resulted in a considerable income, which was much better than earning half a tael of silver while staying in the Yamen. The Zhou family is no exception. After learning that he was going to be exiled, Zhou Qinghuan immediately cleared the way and asked the Yamen attendant responsible for escorting him to help purchase horses. And he gave a large sum of silver to keep a pair of children and settle them down with the family's servant. Now, although Zhou Yan has successfully escaped punishment, they no longer need to go to that smoky place. The silver that can be given out cannot be asked for, nor can it be returned. Besides, Zhejiang also has a salary, and Zai is now in a bad job. It's enough for the whole family to eat and drink. The family was able to gather together again, and Zhou Qinghuan was obviously in a great mood. He took a sip of wine and ignored his wife's complaint. However, as soon as he finished speaking, Li Ji immediately threw his white eyes at him and said, "You, with two little white-eyed wolves, we only have 5 taels of silver in a month. What's enough?" As he spoke, Li Ji suddenly felt aggrieved for some reason. He patted his chopsticks, grabbed the back of his head, and walked away in anger. A mournful voice came from afar. This family is poor, and I don't even have the money to buy a patch. Don't pay attention to your aunt, Yu reading www.yuukangshu.net. Tell me quickly, how did the mechanism trigger? Li Ji's departure did not disrupt the joyful atmosphere of the family banquet. Zhou Qinghuan held a broken porcelain bowl and looked curiously at his nephew. Yes, big brother. You said no one in the school field touched the mechanism, so how was the mechanism triggered? Zhou Sheng, who had always boasted that he was much smarter than his elder brother, stared at Zhou Yan and for the first time had a sense of agreement in his eyes. Well, the kind of recognition that older generations have towards younger generations. Big brother, hurry up. Zhou Haoxiao blushed slightly and urged her to speak out. She is different from the two men in the family, with a small star in her almond eyes filled with admiration. Looking at Chi-Chi's 4 pairs of eyes, Zhou Yan cleared his throat and slowly added a bowl of wine to himself. Then he slowly lifted his hand and handed the broken porcelain bowl to his mouth. However, just as a few people were waiting for Zhou Yan to take a sip of the fine wine and solve his confusion. Zhou Yan raised his hand, but it froze in mid-air. He tilted his head slightly and looked to the side. Auntie, are you really not coming to eat some? Hi. You said you're causing trouble. If you want to eat, go back to the house if you don't eat. Chasing the book to the exciting point, Zhou Qinghuan was forcibly cut off his seal. Angry, Zhou Qinghuan slammed his porcelain bowl in his hand and turned his head to stare at Li Ji, who had half of his body protruding from behind the hall pillar. Yes, mother. If you also want to know, just sit down and listen to Big Brother. Suddenly choking, Zhou Sheng also felt a bit unhappy. Even Zhou Hao, the thoughtful little cotton jacket, frowned and stared at Li Ji. Mom, you really hate me. You. Li Ji felt a little shortness of breath when he was stabbed by Black Heart Cotton's back. His fingers trembled as he pointed towards the happy family of 5 inside the house, and for a while, he could only hold back 2 words. I'm leaving. Chapter 8. Water is deeper than imagined. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The silver moon hangs high. After a minimalist dinner. As soon as Zhou Yan entered the room, his second brother Zhou Sheng followed in. You're with. Just as he was about to say, what are you doing with me? Zhou Yan suddenly realized that he lives with his little brother. The Zhou family is not considered a wealthy family, not even the middle class. There are only 3 wing rooms and 1 fire room in the entire courtyard. The small house where Zhou Yan and his younger brother Zhou Xing live is located on the west side of the yard, adjacent to the fire room, which was originally renovated from the firewood room. Big brother, what are you saying? It's nothing, go to sleep. Shaking his head, Zhou Yan yawned long. Now this body hasn't closed its eyes for 3 days and 3 nights. Now he finally has a bed to sleep on, so he just wants to catch up on a good night's sleep. Don't just come back from Rebirth, but in the blink of an eye, you have gone to the king of hell again due to overwork. Big brother. Zhou Yan fell asleep, but Zhou Sheng was completely sleepless. He sat stiffly by the bed for a long time, muttering, Big brother, have you fallen asleep? I fell asleep. Feeling helpless, Zhou Yan flipped over and sat up. Although tired to death, he couldn't sleep for a moment. Perhaps it is because I have rarely lived at home in recent years, and I am not used to suddenly having more people around me. What's wrong? Zhou Yan yawned incessantly and lifted his eyelids to look at the little brother. Zhou Xing opened his mouth, hesitated slightly, and shook his head. It's okay, big brother, go to sleep, he said. At your age, you are either frustrated with work difficulties or your girlfriend being a demon. However, you are a single dog, so, tell me, what kind of trouble did you encounter at work? Zhou Yan asked casually after yawning again. Upon hearing this, Zhou Sheng was taken aback and said, Work. Hi, it's just that you're at work. You've encountered some trouble while on duty. Well, I've been living here for several years now, so why can't I change this habit of speaking? Shaking his head, Zhou Yan worked hard to clear himself up a bit. But as Zhou Yan shook his head, Zhou Xing frowned slightly. Big brother's imprisonment is like a different person. He used to be a good big brother who didn't speak or laugh. Now not only does it speak strangely, but it's also not serious. Tell me quickly, what kind of trouble have you encountered? Your older brother is going to be exhausted. Ignoring the complicated emotions of the younger brother, Zhou Yan yawned and urged him to speak out. Upon hearing this, Zhou Xing gave him a deep glance before saying, I encountered some difficult things. I didn't realize that my elder brother still has the talent to solve cases before. I wanted to ask him, but after thinking about it, I decided to forget it. I'll discuss it with him again when I have more evidence. Oh, okay, then I'll go to sleep. Without forcing the younger brother, Zhou Yan lay down backwards. In his memory, he wouldn't encounter any major problems in the coming years, so he didn't take this matter to heart. In no time, Zhou Yan's breathing slowly became longer. However, just as he was about to fall asleep, the little brother's ethereal voice came from the sky again. Big brother, have you fallen asleep? You better have something to do. Suddenly standing up, Zhou Yan stared at the little brother without saying anything. At this moment, the cool moonlight shone through the window gap and coincidentally onto his face, leaving Zhou Yan's entire face without a trace of blood. I just wanted to ask Big Brother about the organization. It's okay now, Big Brother, go to bed quickly. Seemingly frightened by Zhou Yan's appearance, Zhou Xing rolled down from his own bed, murmuring softly. He diligently tidied up the bed for Zhou Yan, then reached out and pressed down the big brother who was staring at him. Before long, the voices in the room gradually rose. Perhaps due to a sudden change at home, I was unable to sleep soundly. Zhou Xing slept so fast and so heavy. Zhou Yan stared at the little brother and thought of 100 ways to kill him. Okay, I'm completely awake. I deserve it. After tossing and turning for a long time, Zhou Yan flipped over and sat up. It's no wonder Zhou Xing left his aunt angry at the dinner table and ended up unfinished the entire novel with only the words, confidential. Angry Zhou Qinghuan poured several large bowls of wine and left cursing. Regretful Zhou Haohong looked at her and wept, apologizing and admitting her mistake. Zhou Xing appeared relatively calm, but now it seems that this guy is holding back and waiting to take photos of unscrupulous authors. It's not that I'm trying to make a fuss, I really can't say it. Rubbing the swollen temples, Zhou Yan truly experienced what it means to be unable to live by doing evil. In fact, when it comes to the triggering method of the mechanism, there is really no mysterious secret hidden within it. It's just a simple double hairstyle mechanism, one hidden under the martial arts stage and the other far outside the school field. And this was discovered only half a month after the case was closed. The timeline is not right, so Zhou Yan dare not say. To avoid triggering a series of unpredictable chain reactions. I remember the martial arts performance platform was newly built, but the entire campus. Thinking of the case, Zhou Yan's body suddenly trembled violently. A detail that he had, and now almost overlooked, took root and sprouted in his mind in this moment. Then in a blink of an eye, he grew into a towering tree, broke out of his head, transformed into a big hand, and gave him a hard slap. Stupid, but not harmful to the brain. Sleeping slot. With a low cry, Zhou Yan jumped up directly from the bed, and the fine beads of sweat oozing from his forehead converged in the blink of an eye, flowing down his cheeks. The Yanwu Terrace is newly built, and it is reasonable to use this stall to set up secret devices to steal treasures. However, it has been more than a decade since the completion of the North Campus. Could it be said that someone had planned this theft more than a decade ago? Big Brother. What's wrong? Zhou Yan's movements were too loud. Zhou Sheng, who was sleeping soundly, was awakened and looked at his suddenly insane big brother with some dissatisfaction. It's okay, sleep on your sleep. Zhou Yan reached out and stroked the little brother's head. He stepped on the long moonlight inside the room, his eyes fixed. Calm down, calm down. I now believe that the planning of this case more than 10 years ago was too arbitrary. The connecting device outside the school field may also have been secretly buried together with the newly built martial arts platform. Although there may be some difficulty, there is still room for operation. Oh my! Why didn't I think about going to the scene to see it? If I had seen the green bricks dug up with my own eyes, I could roughly distinguish when this linkage device was installed in the schoolyard. It's okay if it's newly installed, but if it were buried underground early, it would be really scary. With a pause of his foot, Zhou Yan took a deep breath. In the previous life, even to our death, Changyu and I were not entirely certain whether Tianji Pavilion was the mastermind behind this case. But they are definitely the number one suspects. And the discord between Tianji Pavilion and the royal family is something that young children know. Is it? Because Changyu and I forced Tianji Pavilion too tightly, which led to the disaster of murder. But that's not right either. After all, neither Changyu nor I have any evidence to prove anything until we die. The Tianji Pavilion is not about to kill people and silence them, it is Princess Yu Chang who will destroy them. Who is going to be unfavorable to Changyu? For what? And is this really related to this case? Tianji Pavilion. Royal family. Buddha Kingdom. No, no, my head is so itchy. I feel like I'm going to have a brain again. Chapter 9. Picking up leaks. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The next day, at noon. As soon as Zhou Yan entered the courtyard with a yawn, he saw Chu Molan squatting there watering the flowers. Little girl, where are Zai and Ziyu? Has Zijiang risen? Putting down the copper pot in her hand, Chu Molan took a few steps to approach Zhou Yan and looked up and down with her beautiful eyes, looking as if she couldn't even see enough. Zai went outside the city to find a craftsman to make tables and chairs, and Ziyu went to buy dishes. She said, then I'll go for a walk too. With a chuckle, Zhou Yan dodged Chu Molan's outstretched palm and made the beautiful woman cover her mouth and chuckle slightly in embarrassment. Auntie. As soon as he opened the courtyard door, Zhou Yan felt a pain in his chest. He took a step back and looked at Li Ji, who was rubbing his bare forehead. He also looked at the few herbs and a sugar cake she was holding in her hand, and his face was full of surprise. Auntie, is there anything uncomfortable with her? Little bastard, what do you think? Li Ji's body trembled unconsciously at first, and suddenly felt a faint pain in the big lump on the back of his head. He glared at his nephew with anger. Hee, did you steal food and ruin your stomach last night? You. Li Jiho's pretty face turned red after being scolded by his nephew. His teeth were sore, and he wished he could strangle the little bastard in front of him. Last night at dinner, she was only focused on getting angry and didn't even touch her chopsticks. In the middle of the night, I naturally feel hungry and unable to fall asleep. After waking Zhou Qinhuan up a few times, Li Ji couldn't resist the insect infestation in his stomach and went into the fire room to clean up the remaining food for the night. Unexpectedly, before she could even move her chopsticks, she was so scared that she threw the plate out. My stomach wasn't full, but instead I completely developed a stress syndrome called, "Hi, Auntie." Of course, Zhou Yan did not intend to scare his aunt on purpose. The fire room was only separated by a wall from where he slept, and when he heard any movement in the middle of the night, he naturally wanted to go and check it out. Fortunately, after being provoked by Li Ji, he emerged from a state of self-doubt. Otherwise, he would have to see people with the panda's eyes today. The only regret is that the brain was not able to grow successfully. Auntie, goodbye. Auntie, take care. Looking at the beautiful aunt who was about to run away, Zhou Yan knew it was time to withdraw, so he waved his hand and ran away. You. His body trembled involuntarily again. Li Jigang was about to reach out to grab his scumbag nephew who was about to escape, but he saw his daughter limping over from the street corner holding a pile of broken coarse porcelain bowls. "You foolish woman, why can't you even walk now?" Seeing a small bloodstain imprinted on his daughter's pants, Li Ji's eyes flashed with a hint of heartache. Then, an angry expression appeared on his face, pointing to a pile of broken bowls and scolding him, "What's going on at home? How much money is enough for you to spend so much?" "Big brother," the pretty face turned to Zhou Yan, and Zhou Hao's eyes were filled with tears as he entrusted Chu Baba. "Isn't it just a few bowls, Auntie?" Zhou Yan glanced at the beautiful Auntie beside him and took the pile of bowls that were broken in his sister's arms. He picked out the ones that were still intact and said, "When I receive the reward, I will exchange them for white jade bowls at home." Returning the white jade. Li Ji looked disdainfully at his nephew's glare and said, "Would be grateful if you could return to the city defense camp again." "Are you still rewarded?" "Humph. Xiaonyang, could you give Ziyu some medicine?" Ignoring the beautiful anti-knife, Zhou Yan looked at Chu Molan who walked out of the courtyard, grabbed a few herbs from Li Ji's hand, handed them to his sister, and touched her head. "These herbs are all for removing blood stasis and relieving pain. After applying them for a while, they won't hurt anymore. Big brother will go buy you something delicious," he said. With a whimper, Zhou Hao looked at the big brother who turned around and left, with a hint of smile in his slightly sparkling eyes. "Ziyu doesn't cry, I'll give you medicine now." Looking at the departing figure, Chu Molan also smiled gently, taking the herbal medicine from Zhou Hao's hand and helping her walk towards the courtyard, her voice soft. Li Ji stood dumbfounded at the door for a while before finally regaining his senses. Turning around and entering the courtyard, he reached out and pushed the door, but suddenly he was stunned again. Kazlan's big eyes blinked, looking at the empty left hand and then at the right hand, which had some extra thick porcelain bowls at some point. Suddenly, I felt my chest becoming even more congested. "Little bastard, I used to know what herbs are used for. And where are my sugar cakes? It's unnecessary to think too much now. Quickly improve your strength and status so that I can touch more." Taking a bite of the sugar cake in his hand, Zhou Yan paused in his footsteps. Staring at the small cake that was only half the size of a palm, frowning. Tangbing hit someone. "Ah. Auntie is not easy either. I won't bully her anymore." With a hard face, Zhou Yan stuffed the beaten candy cake into his stomach while walking, looking left and right. Seeing a vendor selling sticky cakes not far away, I thought for a moment and walked over. "Boss, pack me 3 sticky cakes and sprinkle more osmanthus candy. Since I have agreed to Ziyu, I naturally cannot miss the small snacks. Little girl also needs to have it." Auntie thinking in his heart, Zhou Yan reached out and patted the vendor who was packing sticky cakes, saying, "Boss, just pack 2 pieces. I remember the limit for humans to not eat or drink is 3 to 7 days, which varies from person to person. Auntie's physique. She should be starving for 2 days." Nodding, Zhou Yan paid in front of the vendor's somewhat strange gaze and slipped 2 sticky cakes into the nearby pharmacy. The pharmacy is not large, with only 2 shelves standing by the wall. On one shelf are finished pills, while on the other shelf are various herbs. Choose what you want and come here to pay after finishing. As soon as I stepped into the store, the muffled voice of the waiter came from behind the counter. Zhou Yan glanced at the shop assistant with his head down and didn't know what to do, but ignored him and walked straight towards the shelf where loose medicine was placed. My current body is almost 1 step away from entering the 7th grade martial arts realm from the 8th grade martial arts disciple realm. However, the most important thing at the moment is still to wash my tendons and slay my marrow. Zhou Yan was rummaging on the shelf, searching for herbs that could help relax muscles and clear the meridians. Unlike local cultivators, while cultivating the 12 major meridians, he also knows 8 other meridian routes that are unknown to cultivators in this world. These 8 meridians are different from the 12 meridians, they do not directly belong to the organs, nor do they match the exterior and interior. They do not perform extraordinary deeds, so they are called Qi Jing. This is knowledge in the medical philosophy of Great China, and Zhou Yan's knowledge is very limited. But it was with this limited knowledge in his mind that he stepped into the realm of a 5th-rank general in just 3 years. Moreover, his physical fitness far exceeds that of martial artists of the same level, making him the world's #1 martial arts genius. However, in the previous life, Zhou Yan suddenly realized that the 12 main meridians practiced by all martial artists in this world were actually the 12 orthodox scriptures in the great Chinese medicine after entering the 7th-rank Great Perfection realm. With this discovery, Zhou Yan naturally thought of the 8 extraordinary meridians. With a trial-and-error attitude, I infused my luck and didn't expect to be able to practice. And its effect is really pleasing. Unfortunately, he practiced a bit late, and the already established meridian width prevented him from fully penetrating the 8 meridians. This caused him to feel considerable resistance when attempting to challenge the 4th-level realm. So Zhou Yan plans that from now on, his first priority in cultivation is to first connect the 8 meridians, and then use the terrifying blessing of the 8 meridians to break through the realm. Sleeping trough, such a thick, tongluo grass. Sweeping through the plants of herbs with his palm, Zhou Yan felt somewhat helpless. He knows he can't afford what he likes, and buying what he doesn't like is useless. At this moment, a herb with 7 serrated leaves and the thickness of a thumb caught his eye. Well, I'm afraid it's been 50 years. Zhou Yan picked up the herb and his palms trembled slightly. Yu reading www.yuukangshu.net. Tongluo grass is very common, but it is a rare item from 50 years old. With this single herb alone, Zhou Yan was confident in connecting the 4 peculiar veins. So no matter how much money is spent, even if it's borrowed, he must take down this herb. Little brother, how much is this tong mai grass? Quickly approaching the counter, Zhou Yan shook the herbal medicine in his hand and asked. He plans to first inquire about the price and negotiate with his colleagues before going back to raise money. 3 coins. With his head down, the shop assistant casually quoted the price. This left Zhou Yan stunned, then shook the herbal medicine in his hand and said, I said, how much does this tong mai grass cost? I said 3 coins, 3 coins. If you want it, just pay for it and leave. If you can't afford it, just leave. An extremely impatient voice came, causing Zhou Yan to frown as he looked at the shop assistant who had always kept his head down. He then stopped talking and took out 3 coins of broken silver from his pocket, throwing it onto the counter. I asked you before. The silver fell, and Zhou Yan turned around and left. He is not a Virgin Mary, asking twice is already giving him the greatest sincerity. So, whether this pharmacy is damaged or not has nothing to do with him. I didn't expect any unexpected surprises. As he stepped out of the pharmacy, Zhou Yan's slightly furrowed eyebrows suddenly relaxed. Although the attitude of the shop assistant is a bit unpleasant, they may have used 3 coins to break the silver and obtained a spiritual grass that can sell up to 30 taels of silver, which is still very pleasing. However, just as Zhou Yan was smiling and preparing to carry the spirit grass into his arms, a palm reached out from the side and placed it on his wrist. Friend, can you give me this herb? I'll offer it 10 times the price, 3 liang. Chapter 10. Big Dog Owners. You are listening at novelfull.audio. I won't sell even 30 taels. Glancing at the young man wearing a strong suit next to him, Zhou Yan shook his arm and opened the other person's palm. Friend. He rubbed his palm and felt the force emanating from it. The young man was slightly surprised, but still shook his body and stood in front of Zhou Yan. Friend, I have reached a critical point in my meridian communication and I need a large annual, meridian herb to assist me. We are all cultivators. If you can give me this herb today, I will make you a friend. Making friends is okay. Although Zhou Yan was a bit unhappy when he was stopped twice, considering that the other person spoke politely, he didn't really get angry. But this medicine really can't make you, and I've reached a critical moment in my cultivation, so I'm sorry, my friend. After speaking, Zhou Yan hugged his fist and walked away, but this time Meng Yu did not stop him. However, what Zhou Yan didn't know was that at the moment he turned around, Meng Yu's still warm cheeks instantly turned extremely dark and fierce. With a cold expression in his eyes, he stared at his back for a long time and spat out softly, "Give something shameless to your face. You wait." Not by Chang Yu's side, the cost of cultivation is a big problem. Zhou Yan's face became slightly bitter as he threw away the remaining 2 coins of silver in his hand. Practicing martial arts requires various types of pills to assist. To advance quickly, it is even more necessary to fill in a large number of pills. And these are all silver with white flowers. There will be a reward in a few days, but according to my current needs, it will be enough to support my expenses for at least a month. Besides, my family. With a grin, Zhou Yan picked up the broken silver in his hand. Upon careful consideration, he and the entire Zhou family seemed to have fallen into an awkward situation of being at a loss. For the sake of management, everything that could be sold at home was sold, and even some daily utensils such as tables and chairs were only kept for 3 people. Nowadays, families can gather together again, and some things inevitably have to be added back. And the Zhou family was not originally a wealthy family, so after finishing the left and right management, Zhou Qinghuan left less than 10 taels of silver for Chu Molan to use as a transitional measure. Where can I get some money up there? As soon as Zhou Yan thought about racking his brains to search for a long time to come, he felt a headache. How about making some drawings and selling them to inexperienced craftsmen? No, those guys are not only stingy, but also nagging. Establishing a relationship with them requires an extremely long process. Oh, if only I could get to know someone from Qinji Pavilion. In my previous life, I thought about finding a skilled celestial mechanic to develop the yin-yang double order and see if I could create something like a chat room or forum. And then I also have a complete drilling system. Hey! If you want to open a post or reply, please open a red diamond. If you want to have a private chat with netizens, please open a yellow diamond. If you want to delete chat records, I'm sorry, this is a privilege that only a respected purple diamond user can have. Of course, it is best to overcome the technical difficulty of projecting images. Once this problem can be solved, then I have to sort out the short video whatever I say. At that time, I will first give it to the software hardening engineers at Yihong Academy, and then I can sit at home and wait to count the money. Wait, I seem to have deviated. It's all thanks to those high-tech engineers. Just as he was about to slap himself, Zhou Yan suddenly felt a pain in his chest. Okay, it seems like we need to look at the almanac when we go out in the future. I thought I picked up a big leak with 3 coins, but today must be considered an auspicious day in the Chinese zodiac. After going through the process of hitting someone with sugar cakes, blocking the way for medicine, and now being hit in the chest with a head hammer for the 2nd time. He thinks it's better to look at the almanac when going out in the future. You. Rubbing his chest, Zhou Yan looked at the figure sitting in front of him. Just as he was about to say something, his eyes suddenly widened. The depression in my heart instantly swept away. What a beautiful big-eyed cute girl. Little sister, are you okay? You're so young. With a snap, Zhou Yan's outstretched palm was clapped open, and the girl stood up, her staring expression even more delicate. Little. How can you know my greatness? Subconsciously lowering his head to look down, Zhou Yan became unhappy and said, Little sister, you should watch more when walking in the future. Today you hit me, what if you hit an old, weak, woman, and child? I'm sorry. I'm sorry, waved her small hand, and big-eyed cute sister apologized, but kept her head down. Is this something lost? Looking at big-eyed cute sister's somewhat anxious expression, Zhou Yan's anger immediately subsided. Forget it, just pay attention when walking in the future. After speaking, Zhou Yan lifted his foot and walked away, but before taking a few steps, he stood still and turned his head to look at the gorgeous big-eyed cute girl, his heart moving. This is obviously a big dog. If you help her find the lost thing, can you get a big red envelope? 3 to 5 taels is not too little, and 3 to 50 taels is not too much. I'm currently short of money, it's like someone came to pass a pillow when I'm dozing off. Moreover, even without red envelopes, it would be great to meet a wealthy and cute daughter. Thinking of this, Zhou Yan quickly walked back to the girl's side and asked with concern, "Little sister, did you lose something?" "Don't call me little sister." She swung a sharp-eyed knife, and big-eyed cute continued to look around, no longer paying attention to Zhou Yan. Seeing this, Zhou Yan was not distressed. He looked at the delicate figure gradually moving away and spoke softly, "Maybe I can help you retrieve the lost item." "Really?" Upon hearing these words, big-eyed cute sister suddenly seemed to have changed her personality and ran a few steps towards Zhou Yan, her long eyelashes fluttering and fluttering. "Don't be cute. I'll just eat this." Striving to control his facial muscles and not make himself laugh too lewdly, Zhou Yan cleared his throat and said, "It shouldn't be difficult." "Great. Where are we going to find it?" Upon hearing the affirmative answer, big-eyed cute sister became even more excited. Seeing this, Zhou Yan was not in a hurry and waved his hand, saying, "Wait, if you don't let me call you little sister, then I must know your name." The first step in establishing a relationship is to exchange names. Afterwards, it's possible to have dinner together, watch movies, and get to know each other better. "My name is Yi Shiyan." This name is soft and cute enough. "My name is Zhou Yan." With a smile, Zhou Yan asked, "Miss Yi, what did you lose?" "My wallet, there's such a big sum of silver inside." Hua, Yu reading www.uukangshu.net. It's really great to have an ending when speaking. Feeling that he had already shown an ant-like smile, Zhou Yan reached out to touch his face, pretending to be in a state of contemplation, but in reality, he secretly pinched himself. "I am excited because there is a big sum of silver in my wallet, not because she can whimper. Well, I am a serious person. Miss Yi, let me tell you about the process of throwing your wallet, and I will analyze it for you." After setting up his own character, Zhou Yan looked at big-eyed cute sister in front of him. Lost is lost, there's no such thing as it. Her long eyelashes fluttered a few more times, and Yi Shiyan looked at Zhou Yan with a hint of distrust in her eyes. "Hi, let me put it this way. When was the last time you saw a purse?" Before the meeting, little Loli was not only cute, but also a bit foolish. Zhou Yan guided her to speak out. I was still there when I checked out at the Drunken Immortal Tower, and then I disappeared." Drunken Immortal Tower. That luxurious restaurant on Chongping Street. When did you come out of the restaurant? About 2 quarters ago. Did you fall while turning towards Yong'an Street? Upon hearing this, Yi Shiyan suddenly looked surprised and said, "How do you know?" "Because I'm not blind." With a slight twitch at the corner of his mouth, Zhou Yan looked at the silly and cute girl in front of him and explained. Among the more than 10 nearby streets, only the intersection of Chongping and Yong'an Streets is undergoing drainage repairs. However, there are traces of mud on your knees and arms, and time limits your range of movement, so I conclude that you have fallen there. You hesitated for a moment, and the distrust in Yi Shiyan's eyes disappeared instantly. A hint of admiration appeared on her pretty face. "You're so amazing."